Hey, everybody. We got a harrowing but funny one today because my guest is Senator Tammy Duckworth. Her book, Every Day is a Gift, is both harrowing and really funny. And it chronicles her life with a focus on her being shot down, the pilot of a Black Hawk helicopter in Iraq, and her rehabilitation. And as I say, unbelievably harrowing, but also we had a great time discussing this, and she has a wonderful, wonderful sense of humor, and so do I. So, so it's a harrowing but funny one for a change. Well, Liz Cheney is willing to give up her leadership post in the Republican House caucus. She's been third in leadership as conference chair. The conference chair actually has no formal defined role. It's really kind of a plum that you get for being either a well-known or very promising popular figure with some promise in the party. Liz Cheney took a stand. She says that the presidential election was not stolen by Joe Biden. Very brave, very brave. She must be one of those people that, I don't know, thinks God is keeping track of everything. Look, the truth is that all God cares about is whether you consider him God or not. He's very, very status-driven, and what matters to him more is not so much who believes in him, but whoever does, the higher their status, the better. So he's thrilled that the woman replacing Liz Cheney, Elise Stefanik, the 36-year-old representative from, I believe, the Albany area of New York, is someone who claims, at least, that she worships him. And whether it's true or not, God doesn't really care. It's just, so it's all kind of awkward. On Thursday, Mitch McConnell was asked about that flap, specifically the Liz Cheney flap, and to avoid having to say anything about that awkward situation, he deliberately made news by saying he wasn't giving that matter any thought, but instead said, 100% of my focus is on standing up to this administration. What we have in the United States Senate is total unity, from Susan Collins to Ted Cruz, in opposition to what the new Biden administration is trying to do to this country. And, of course, that's exactly what he did during the Barack Obama administration. He filibustered more executive appointees than had been filibustered previously in the entire history of the country. And, of course, all kinds of legislation, and that was mainly what the hell he did. But evidently he miscalculated, a tad, because his pollsters must have pointed out to him that a lot of Biden's agenda, if not a vast majority of his agenda, is very popular with the American people. So he was asked about that again the next day. Mr. Leader, are you really just willy-nilly going to oppose everything President Biden is going to try to do? First, we have to see what that agenda is. And the press, they just went, McConnell reverses himself on a dime. That's not a story. So it's a great time to be on the Hill. Hey, we've got a great one today. Harrowing, but funny, for a change. Because Tammy Duckworth is with me today, the great Tammy Duckworth. Thank you, Tammy, for joining me today. This is your second time on the podcast. You joined us for about 5 minutes last September after the Atlantic Monthly reported that Trump didn't want amputees to attend military parades because he reportedly said no one wants to see that. So, thank you.
Well, at least we don't have to see him anymore. So there's been an improvement.
Yeah, no one wants to see that. I'll tell you that. And and by the way, thank you for being grievously wounded.
That cracks me up every time.
That's kind of it's not an inside joke. It's in the
It's in the
damn
book.
book. Yeah.
It's not an inside
But
joke anymore.
yeah, I came to, I used to do USO tours. So I visited you and at Walter Reed a number of times, and I'd take Polaroids with the soldiers there who were wounded, and I'd write, "Thank you for your service." And at a certain point, you'd say, you said, um, they don't really like that.
Well, it's just that everybody says it, and it becomes a little bit meaningless because it's not said with like real meaning behind it, And we appreciate that.
Yeah, and
people
I
appreciate
did not
it.
mean it.
No, I didn't mean it.
Yeah, so you said, don't sign a thank you for your service. So that's when I started writing thank you for being grievously wounded. And man, it got a laugh every time.
They all love it. We all
Yep.
love it because we know that there's like a personal engagement. That's the difference. We used to call it. I talk about this in the book. We used to call it the amputee petting zoo, and you knew who was there for you and who was there just for the, photo and the press release. And you were there for us.
I read that in the book, and you said that someone would bring in a professional photographer and take a picture, and then
Yeah.
they'd leave with the picture. And then it
Yeah,
would show up.
you would never see the picture until you saw it in a press release or something later on, and you're like, okay, they're not there for me; they're just there for themselves.
That's really weird. That is so weird. Because I've been doing these USO tours, I was asked if I wanted to go to Walter Reed, and I said, well, of course. But the first time I went there, I was so scared. I thought to myself, how am I supposed to cheer these guys up, And so the first guy there I saw was leaning up against a wall, and he had his leg was missing. And I said to him, what happened to you? And he said, I came in here for a vasectomy. And then I went, oh, I get it. They're supposed to, okay. And then I was fine, and then I just had a good time. We had a good time when I saw you.
You came in the evening after, a long day of me being really tired and everything. You came in the evening and perked me up. It was nice.
Well, boy, this is a harrowing book in terms of what you went through in your recovery. You, man, oh man, it's pretty grisly. You get hit by a rocket-propelled grenade, RPG, right?
Yep. Uh-huh.
In your Blackhawk.
Yeah.
And it pretty much explodes, like, kind of hits you.
It does. It explodes in my lap. Yeah. It basically hits my right leg. There ain't nothing left of that leg.
Yeah, that's gone.
That's gone. Yep.
It's very harrowing, and you speak so highly, you write so highly of all the guys on your crew and on the other crew that came down there, but they did assume you were dead for part of it, and then they saw, no, you're still bleeding, so that means you're pumping blood, so your heart's still going. But gee whiz, wow, holy mackerel, wow, that it was friggin' horrible. And then the recovery is, even in many ways, the pain you describe and the phantom pain and well, I don't want to ruin the book here. I don't want to ruin any surprises.
Well, you know what? This is like, you're talking about the middle of the book when, like, this is like the most, this is the harrowing shoot down. But I hope you laughed out loud at different parts of the book, because I talk about my childhood in Southeast Asia and coming to the U.S. for the first time.
I did not know that you spent you did. You spent your first 16 years in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, following my dad around. My dad was a Vietnam vet and decided he didn't want to come back to the States, so he just kept us overseas. And so I was like a military brat, but with United Nations refugee programs, basically. He was bringing aid to refugees all throughout Southeast Asia.
And your mom is Chinese Thai or Thai Chinese?
She's
ethnically Chinese.
Chinese, born and raised in Thailand. She's the first child and only child in her family born in Thailand. Because her parents fled. They were a small town shopkeepers, but they fled Mao Zedong. They fled the communists.
And there's a lot of ups and downs in your childhood in terms of your family's economic status, and your dad at first doing pretty well and then not so well, and finally at age 16, you, your brother, and your dad go to Hawaii, leaving your mom back there. And then Hawaii ain't so hot either in terms of your dad seems to be hitting the bottom there, right?
He is, yeah. In the book, I describe it almost like he kept trying to find a kind of job that he had where he was a managing director or something, a big job. And he was in his 50s, but not, at this point, he had been unemployed for 5 years. We had no money left. We were in Hawaii because it was the cheapest place we could get to in terms of a plane ticket from Thailand that was U.S. soil. And so what I needed
He's
him
an
to do-
American, so you
he's
can
an
go
American,
there.
yeah. And so what we needed was for him to go get a job as a hotel porter or a front desk guy or something. And he just wouldn't apply for those. He was in denial. And so we hit rock bottom where, but for the grace of a 90-year-old lady with the American Legion Auxiliary who wrote us a personal check, we would have been homeless.
Yeah, well, she saves your ass as
Yeah.
soon as you arrive there, basically. But
Mhm.
then you save your family's ass, or at least your brother and your dad, by hustling a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got the only job, in the family. I handed out flyers on the beach in Waikiki. I had to figure out at 16 who I should hit up with the booze cruise flyers versus the romantic dinner cruise flyers. Here's a snap judgment.
Yeah, and that trained you, of course, for the Senate.
Well, you know what it was at preparing with the Senate was hustling on the beach volleyball court, pretending to not know what I was doing. And
Now
then,
that was hustling, by the way. That was It was like you're a pool shark, except you're a volleyball shark.
Yep.
So you'd be walking in your like a bikini and a sarong. What else? What were you wearing?
A sarong, yeah. I would. There is next to the Hilton Hawaiian Holiday Resort. There's a beach volleyball court that Howleys, mainlanders would come and basically fraternity bros would come and I'd hang out there in my bikini with my sarong on, sitting on the beach, just looking out to the ocean. And I had like this guy that I didn't know him very well, but he's another local, and he would play with them, and then they would, challenge him to a match, and he would just pick me because you know what, I'll just pick her.
Yeah, and they go, and then we would kick their butts. Yeah, and then you kick their ass.
Yeah, so it'd be two guys against him, he and I. Yeah,
and then they break your thumbs. Wait a minute, that's The Hustler. That's a different movie.
No, that's a different movie. No, yeah. I knew when to get out. I knew when to leave once I made, I wasn't greedy, Al. I just needed to make enough money to buy, enough food for the family for the week. So
yeah, and that was a pretty modest place. That was, you slept on essentially a couch and there, and then you got your mom there finally, and you moved to, you go to the University of Hawaii.
Yep.
And your family moves to Virginia, where your dad is from.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I want to ask you about something there, right? Your brother, Tom, yep. You say he's like a boogie boarder, and he is so good that he's going to at 15 going to get a contract or something. Yep. I'm going like, I've boogie boarded. It's the easiest thing in the world. Now, I mean, how good can you get at boogie boarding?
Very good. They go out on those. They go out on those big waves, like the surfers do. That pipeline stuff. I mean, they go out on those waves that kill you.
Oh, okay.
So there's like whole competitions for money and everything with boogie boarding. And so he got really, really good. And then my folks left for Virginia and took him with them because there's no way they were going to leave him.
He was 15.
Behind. Yeah, he was 15.
That is the most relaxing thing I've ever done in my life.
Oh yeah, not the way Tom does it.
Well, no. Well, the way I did it, which is just in Hawaii, you can catch wave after wave after wave after wave.
Yep,
as easy as pie, and it's just like perfect. And a boogie board, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You have fins, so you can move a little bit, and oh my God. So okay, now I understand that was really dangerous.
Yeah. Well, he would go in the pipelines, and they do like flips and spins and all sorts of stuff.
Okay, I didn't do that.
I would pay to see you do that, actually, Al. You could turn pro.
You'd pay to see me break my neck and die. Okay, so okay, now we got you now to Hawaii, and then you graduate from college there, and
Hmm.
then you go to graduate school, but then you join the army.
Yes.
Okay, I got the order right. You meet Brian at like an advanced boot camp kind of thing.
I did 2 years of ROTC instead of 4 years. So in order to do that, I had to go to basic training, which equaled the first 2 years. And then I had a year, which was my junior year of ROTC. That happened to be Brian's senior year. He was an upperclassman. So the fourth year cadets trained the third year cadets. So this was the in between year when the fourth year cadets were training us, getting us ready to go to the advanced camp the next summer where
So
we would
so
get
he's
evaluated.
training you.
They're just the upperclassmen cadets, and they're training you. So you would go off, like we would go off to Fort Meade, Maryland for a long weekend, and they would make us, do a grenade assault course, and they would make us, run around, play infantry in the woods, do prisoner of war searches and things
So
like
what
that.
was his pickup line?
Uh, the women at advanced camp are fucked up. That
That's
was
his
his picked
pickup
up
line.
line.
That's what got you.
That's not what got me. That got my attention, and that pissed me off. And apparently,
Hmm.
he saw that it pissed me off, so he came over afterwards and apologized and helped me clean my M16. And by the time we were done cleaning my M16, he had my phone number. He's pretty smooth.
Okay, but this is how smooth he is because I read that chapter and he both apologizes for that and then later denies that he said it.
Yes, to this day, he says. To
Okay,
this day,
that's
he
not
says
that
that's not the real
smooth.
story. He said the official story of our family is that he said it because that's what happened. But he claims that the real story, which is his version, which is not the official, sanctioned story, is that it was another guy who said it, but he agreed with him. As if that's any better.
So basically, your marriage is based on a lie. But man, oh man, he's there for you and is dealing with something after they're blowed up.
It blowed up good.
And the description of the pain is because I don't know about our listeners. I don't like pain.
Yeah, me
And if
neither.
you don't like pain, folks, read this book and you get an idea of like, holy crap. I don't know how she did this because there's phantom pain, like your feet, you're still feeling your feet burning, right?
Yeah, I get phantom pain to this day. So I have phantom sensation where I feel my toes, I can wiggle them. That's actually for me kind of pleasant mentally because it feels like I still have toes. But I feel like the soles of my feet I'm constantly walking on hot sand. So that I feel that 100% of the time.
Okay. And then the other stuff is much worse than that.
The
It's
breakthrough
it
phantom pain kind of
and you
sucks.
pass out from the pain
Hmm.
and then but you have other people who are amputees who come to Walter Reed and are with you
Yeah.
and really save your life in many ways, right?
Yeah. I think to this day, Juanita Wilson saved my life because at one point the pain was so bad, I didn't know that I could survive. It's funny because I got hit with the RPG and I wasn't worried about surviving. I was worried about landing the helicopter. I get into the emergency room at Baghdad ER and I'm just worried about my guys. I'm not worried about surviving. But the only time when I'm actually worried and I think that I'm not going to live, I can't take this pain anymore. Um, Sergeant First Class Juanita Wilson comes into my room, takes off her artificial limb, and stands next to me and just says, "It's going to get better. Can I help you count?" And I had been reduced at this point to counting to 60 seconds at a time because I thought, I don't know that I'll live another 15 minutes, but maybe I can hang on for 60 seconds. And I was just laying there. I laid there for 5 days counting to 60 seconds, and she stood beside me.
Is that a phenomenon that you kind of get if you give up, you die?
I
You
don't know.
think?
I think
That's what it felt like, right?
that's what it felt like. It felt like
Yeah.
if I stopped counting, I would die.
When she told you it gets better, that that kept you going.
Yeah. And she just stood and she radiated without touching me because she was the one person who understood. Like my mom would come and stroke my hair or lean against the bed to stroke my hair. And that everything that touched me, even somebody touching one end of the bed and the sheets would move, just sent like shooting pain through my body. But I had no more energy left to even say, stop, that hurts. I just had to take it. All the energy I had left was just left. All I could do was just breathe and try to count. I couldn't even waste a breath to say, stop, mom, that hurts. But Juanita understood, and she stood next to my bed, and she didn't touch me. She just radiated this peace, this serenity that it was a tiny little thread of hope, and I just clung to that.
And there are a number of people like that in your book who
Yeah.
come back all the time to Walter Reed, and who, the double amputee, who his wife was a cookie lady, and he was sort of the how to have sex guy.
This is
Maybe
these.
that
They're
wasn't the way you
porters.
put it.
Yeah, this is the Porter, the Tom and L Porter, are Korean War veterans. At the time, he was like 76 or 78, and just tall, distinguished, silver-haired, good old boy from Oklahoma. His wife is from New Hampshire, Vermont, and she's a Vietnam. She's a Korean War veteran as well. So she was a lieutenant herself. They met, at the hospital where she was a physical therapist, and they became the sex talk couple. Like, these 18-year-old guys who lost both their legs, badly scarred. They didn't know if a girl was ever going to love them. And Tom and L Porter would be there and say, "We found love after he lost his legs, and you can ask us anything." And they became the sex talk couple.
You write him saying, like, to these double amputee guys, "Oh man, you'll get women."
Oh yeah, he would tell them it's better than having a puppy.
It's a conversation starter.
Yeah.
Now, again, I go back to these things. You lost 50% of your blood, right?
Yeah, we think so, something like that. I mean, it took 40 units, which I don't know how much is in a human body, but
and most people would say you're half empty, but I'm an optimist, and I like to think that you're half full.
Yeah.
See, that's me.
And leaking in a lot of places. They had to plug me back up in a lot of spots.
Now, tell me about. I think this happened before, like maybe a day or two before I met you, that Rumsfeld came to see you.
Oh yeah,
Or was there, and they asked. They came into your room and said, "Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld is here, and of course you would like to see the Secretary of Defense."
And I said, "Heck no!" And then they did a double take, and then what? I said, "Well, if it's an order, he's in my chain of command. I'll have to see him. But if it's not an order, then I don't want that man crossing the threshold of my door."
And then the next day, I love this. That's the first time they sent you a psychiatrist.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've lost both legs, the
Yep.
use of one arm, no psychiatrist.
No psychiatrist.
You
like
won't
a couple months
see.
in. I've been there a couple months. Yeah.
You've been a couple. No psychiatrist.
Yeah.
You won't see the guy who blew this war, who sent too few people in, who had no plan, who basically said, "Oh, this will take a few weeks, maybe at most a few months."
They'll meet us with candy and flowers.
Yep.
His words. Yeah. They'll greet us with candy and flowers.
And you don't want to see them, and they're going like, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah, they sent a colonel. I mean, like, they didn't send me like some, brand new, resident captain. They sent me a full bird colonel psychiatrist, like the head of the department, to come see me.
You know what's interesting? I did a lot of USO tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I learned a lot on the. I want to ask you about this because I know you're on armed services, and I took a Codel trip with Carl Levin my first year there to Afghanistan, and met with the ambassador, stayed at the embassy, met with the ambassador. I met Karzai. I spent time with McChrystal. I went to a forward operating base. I met with the general who's training the Afghan troops. I learned nothing. They just told me what they were told to tell me, basically. And
Yep.
nothing they nothing they told me actually happened and came true. But I felt like when I did the USO tours, and you you serving there, my God, I felt I learned a lot more. I mean, we would go to these DFACs, to the dining facilities for our listeners, 3-4 times a day, and we'd be there for almost a couple of weeks. And I could see guys who wanted to talk.
Yeah.
And I'd hear everything. I'd hear guys who were gung-ho. I'd hear guys who hated the war or were against the war, but were there for their buddies, right? Like you, I think.
Yeah, I hated the war. I didn't agree with the war in Iraq, but I was not going to shirk my post, and certainly was not going to let my unit go off to war without me.
Right. And that was pretty much a leitmotif of yours when you were at Walter Reed, which is, I want to get back, I want to get back, I want to get back, I want to get back with my unit.
Yeah, but Al, all the times that you went to Walter Reed, how many of the guys did not say that to you? How many of the troops that you talked to, every one of them said to you that they wanted to go back to their unit, right?
A lot of them did. Did. It wouldn't be everybody, but you were pretty vociferous about it. I mean, that impressed me. You were very vociferous about it. And this was very early on, I think, the first time I saw you.
This was hot. It was hot in Iraq. I mean, hot as in the battles were hot right then. You know, Al, it was, I got hurt during the second battle for Fallujah. And
was this 04?
This was 04, end of 04, November of 04. And frankly, I felt guilty being at Walter Reed with my buddies still in harm's way. And I was safe, and people were bringing me gifts and saying nice things to me. And my buddies were still getting shot at.
It sounds like it's easy to make you feel guilty.
I don't know. You know, as an officer, you know, as a soldier, you don't want your buddies in harm's way, and you're safe.
I know, but you lost 2 legs. I mean, come on. I feel guilty.
I didn't say it was logical. And I was kind of medicated at the time. Well, no, I wasn't kind of. I was medicated at the time.
Yeah, it sounds like you were medicated a lot. And the worst part, one of the worst parts to me was the antibiotics, because you got some kind of common bacteria that are infection.
Yeah, Acetobacter. It's a antibiotic resistant bacteria that like 95%. If you had open wounds in Iraq, 95% of the troops with wounds came back with it. Yeah.
So you're getting this all the time, and it's making you nauseous, so you can't eat, or you don't want to eat. I gotta say, it sounded unpleasant.
It was. It was unpleasant. Yeah. That's why there's a whole chapter called "Own the Suck" in the book.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Own the suck. Let me ask you about what's going on now in the Senate.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, I guess it looks like you got one more crack at a reconciliation, right?
Yep.
And what's that going to be? Infrastructure, you think?
That'll be infrastructure. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, in order to do anything else, like, you know, Senate Bill 1, which is the Voting Rights Act, I mean, there's no way. There's you have to be pretty creative to justify the Voting Rights Act as a budget bill.
Yeah, that's not gonna. Parliamentarian isn't gonna allow that.
Yeah, so that we'll have to change the filibuster.
Well, you got this guy Manchin and Sinema.
Yeah,
and this is what I think Manchin may be doing, and I don't know this for sure. But I carefully read his op-ed in the Washington Post about this, in which he said he doesn't want to end the filibuster or weaken it. But then he did say something about the Republicans have to, he wanted to get to regular order, basically, where you write bills in committee, they go to the floor, you have open amendments, you vote on the amendments, and then you vote on the bill. That's the way we used to do things, right?
I have no idea. I've never seen that either when I was in the House or the Senate. I've never seen this phenomenon called regular order.
Yeah, we actually kind of did that. Now, to me, looking at the Republicans and the way they have behaved for the last several years, that ain't going to happen. So I don't know if, there are a lot of people who liberals who criticize Joe, they have to realize that if Joe weren't there, we wouldn't be in the majority.
Exactly.
And he's from a state that went for Trump by 40%.
Yep.
So God bless him. And he's a politician. And I don't know this for sure, but I think he's basically saying to the Republicans, let's see you play ball. There's all this thing like, well, Biden has to work with the Republicans. Hey, the Republicans have to work with Biden. A little bit. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the next thing that's on the agenda is going to be the infrastructure package, and that's something that they should want. Now, we've broken out the water infrastructure package because I got to lead that, and it's coming up this week. That passed out of committee unanimously, so I think we're going to move that on its own. So we know that Republicans like infrastructure, and they want and need infrastructure. So let's see them play ball. But there's always the talking filibuster too, right? So, and Manchin has left the door open for that. He said, well, I would consider a talking filibuster potentially.
Yes. I mean, I have proposed with Norm Ornstein, and I think this is now out there pretty much, changing it from we need 60 to stop a filibuster to they need 41 to continue a filibuster. So in other words, it's the same number, right?
Yep.
It's just
you got to get 40 other people
41,
to agree that
41.
you're a filibuster. Well, you would be one, and then you need 40 other people to agree with you that you want to maintain the filibuster, right?
Right. And you'd have to show up.
Yeah.
As opposed to just say, I have one guy saying I object, and then you have to come up with 60. No, this means you have to. The point of the filibuster is if the minority really cares about something, they can filibuster. But right now, all they have to do is somebody has to say I object, and you got to filibuster, and that's not what it was.
Correct. Yeah, they can go home and go on vacation or go to Cancun.
Exactly. The first week I was there, did you serve with Jim Bunning at all?
No.
Was he a crabby guy? Oof, wow. Anyway, so I'm there. The first week I'm there, we go to do the Thursday votes. As you know, our audience may or may not know, that's the last vote of the week. And then you go there to the subway to go to your office and then go to the airport and go to your state and work, do the weekend. So I'm there the first week, and I did not know that Jim was a grumpy guy. So I said, hey, Jim, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday. And he goes, I don't have to be here on Monday. It's going to be a cloture vote. And then I said, well, Jesus, that's okay. So they don't have to even show up. And they're filibustering, but the burden's on us. And at that point, we had 59 because Teddy was sick. This is going to take some while to play out. But I hope you're right. I mean, Trump talked about, remember every week was infrastructure week with him, and he was the big builder, remember? He's the big builder. And he was going to do $1 trillion infrastructure bill and never got to it at all. And you'd think everyone would be for that, especially with him. I mean, we would have been for it. Anyway.
They could never get their act together. Instead, the way that they originally said they were going to pay for it was to lower the tax rate to get dollars that companies were keeping overseas repatriated. But then when they got that deal, instead of taking that $1 trillion from overseas money to, that corporations were bringing back to the U.S., instead of putting that into infrastructure, they just gave it back to the large corporations and the richest of the rich, who then turn around and use it to buy back stocks.
That's right. And they got richer. No, it's quite, I mean, there's no excuse. I don't know what you guys can do in terms of getting these Republicans. I mean, it sounds like on the crime bill, maybe there's some cooperation. It'd be nice to see some of that. But what I saw, like on the COVID Relief Act, which was, the 10 of them come to the White House and they counter 1.9 trillion with 600 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that serious? Why is that like we're going to work with you?
Yeah. Listen, It boggles the mind that not a single Republican, not a single one voted for the American Rescue Plan. All the things that they voted against, they voted against more money for immunizations. They voted against money to get our public schools open. They voted against putting $1,400 into people's pockets so that they can pay their back rent and their utility bills.
And it was amazingly popular with the American people, like
desperately
almost
needed.
70%.
And by the way, Janet Yellen said, if we don't get this out the door, we go into a recession. We go into a free fall. And that's what she's saying about the infrastructure package that we're looking at. She's saying, listen, you need to pass this because this will stimulate the economy. If you don't do this, we will be stuck in stagnation for as long as, several years. You get this infrastructure bill out, this money, yeah, it's got a big price tag, but it's not going to go to, companies that are buying back stocks, right? This money will go into...
It goes to infrastructure.
It will go to infrastructure. It's going to go into like every local community. It's going to go not just to fix the pothole in front of your the road in Main Street. It's going to go to the diner on Main Street because the people who work on that pothole are going to go eat at that diner. This money goes into the economy, will actually generate growth.
It really goes to things like, I'll go to communities where the train track is between the hospital and the town. and they have a train that takes 20 minutes to go with carrying oil, and the ambulance has to wait there for 20 minutes. I mean, what you want to do is build an underpass. There's all, and you want our airports to like at least resemble in quality the airports in Europe and all of that stuff. At the end of the day, you'll get a world-class infrastructure. That's what we need, and you'll have people have jobs in the meantime. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. Hawley.
I mean,
I'm sorry to laugh because I have a dark sense of humor. I know you do too.
I do.
Okay?
I do. I mean,
but okay, for the listener, he is the only one who voted against extending hate crime law to ethnic Asians, right?
Yep. All we did was, we passed legislation that basically made sure that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders were a recognized group that are on the receiving end of hate crimes, and asking for a bigger look into the Justice Department's data to see how many crimes involving Asian Americans were actually hate crimes, were never reported as such. And he voted against that.
And the only
one guy.
Okay, so that's what was his reasoning exactly? Did you go up to him afterwards and go like, "Hey, I disagree with you"?
Oh,
but we're pals,
he did
right?
one of those pop his head in the back, thumbs down, and then popped out again, kind of vote right at the end too. So I think what he has said in public is he was worried about freedom of speech, because if you use a racial slur against an Asian while you're committing a crime, that's one of the signals that it's a hate crime. But he says, well, that's freedom of speech.
So that is actually the signal that it is a hate crime.
Right.
Otherwise, it could be just a garden variety robbery or something, right?
Yeah.
But then if you use your freedom of speech to say something racist,
then it becomes a hate crime.
Yeah.
But he was worried about the freedom of speech implications.
That's bizarre. I remember Rand Paul, one of the first votes he cast was one of these where he was the only one to vote against something. And it was this. There was a certain point where people were shining lasers into the cockpits of the blind pilots as they were landing at airports, to make that illegal and make it a crime, a federal crime, passed 99-1, and Rand Paul voted against it. And I went up to him. I said, "What the hell was that?" And he goes, "Well, that should be up to the states." And I said, "What could be more interstate commerce than an airport, than a fly?"
The fluid from somewhere else.
I can't think of anything.
But in his defense, sometimes he goes so far right, he ends up on the left and helps us in votes here and there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he'll be for being able to smoke pot or that kind
Yeah.
of stuff, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And for prison reform, maybe, I think.
Yep.
Right?
He
You're
goes
good
so
on
far
that?
right and so far libertarian that he comes back on the left. So.
Yeah, God bless him.
Mhm.
But, not really. No, God bless everyone. Okay, this George Floyd crime bill, the police and what's Justice and Policing Act. Do you have any
Yep.
insight into that? What's going on with that?
Well, that is actually in some negotiations right now where it may actually be moving a little bit. So Cory Booker is leading it up this time. All that he said has been very cryptic, but she's like, I'm hopeful we're engaging in some productive negotiations. That's all I got to say. That's all I want to say. So it's something that could move, and I guess there are Republicans who are actively engaging with him and negotiating it. And I've got something in that bill as well, which I think is something that Republicans should be able to support. My Police Education and Independent Investigation Act. That's been looped into that. And what that does is it creates grant money for police forces so that they can use it for training. And the training must include understanding about racial inequities and potential racist structures within society. So if you do police training, it would also involve that component. And then the big part of the bill is actually mandatory independent investigations of police-involved shootings and violence. So that usually what happens, it's the local district attorney's office that will come in and investigate when there's a police-involved shooting, for example. But that local district attorney's office relies on that same police department to help them win cases. Yeah. And so my bill would actually require anytime there's a police involved shooting or violence that an independent board comes in. And that's one that I don't see it. How could anybody, disagree with that?
Yeah. The President Obama had a task force on this, and we actually had Charles Ramsey, who was the former police chief from Philadelphia and DC on that, and they had a number of these one about sensitivity to ethnic and language and race of your community.
Yes.
And encouraging that. So that's what you're talking about, right?
I am, yes. And that, there are also things that have to do with people with disabilities as well. A lot of people who are hearing impaired are victims of police involved violence just because the police officers shouting at them and they can't hear and they're not responding. And the police officers don't realize this is someone who is hard of hearing. And so the hard of hearing actually are have a much higher percentage of being involved in police involved shootings and violence.
And there needs to be training. There needs to be a force that's reflective of the community, including language, right?
Including language, exactly. And then also, what we need is more funding for programs so that a lot of the times when somebody calls 911 and they're asking for help, they don't need a police officer. They need a substance abuse specialist to come to the door. They need a mental health, specialist who knows where there is a mental health bed that, the person in your family is having a crisis can go to.
Well, it's crisis intervention training is what we're talking about there. And it's interesting. We had on this podcast Judge Steve Leifman from Miami-Dade, and they basically have really emphasized crisis intervention training. And they have crisis intervention teams, including the 911 operators. And, when you're saying like someone calls 911, sometimes when someone calls and there's a domestic dispute and you want to send someone, they ask a certain list of questions, and depending on the answers, they may send a social worker.
Yes.
As opposed to sending cops, which is really smart. And they have crisis intervention teams all over the place in Miami, and they've reduced the number of shootings in Miami from like 90 over a 5-year period to like 16 over the last 5-year period.
Wow.
So it's there's lots of stuff to do here. Now, qualified immunity, is that a sticking point, or is that something?
Yeah, that's a sticking point. That's, I think, where they're negotiating. That's where a big chunk of the negotiation is happening.
That's an issue about whether you can sue a cop, right?
Right.
And I think the compromise might be that you can sue the police force.
Yeah.
As opposed to the cop.
Exactly.
So that might. So I know you can't talk much more about it or any more about it, but I think there's hope here, right?
There's hope. That's the key thing, is that there is hope. The hope is that the Republicans are still at the table and they're still negotiating. And the issue of qualified immunity is definitely one of the key sticking points, but we're still negotiating on it. So they've not walked away from that.
Well, that's encouraging. That's encouraging. And, congratulations on the book. It's a bestseller.
It is.
A New York Times
you.
bestseller. And
yeah, I've never written anything. So this is great.
Well, it's very you. I mean, I must say, it's very your voice, very your story, obviously. But I enjoyed reading it, and glad I'm in it. I got that little thing where I look good. I look good in it.
Yeah, you're in it because you were there for me at Walter Reed, and you weren't using me as part of the MPT petting zoo. You were there for me, and you thanked me for being grievously wounded. So,
well, thanks again for being grievously wounded. That'll be the second time in this interview, and thank you the third time. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening. That beautiful music is by Leo Kottke, the great Leo Kottke. I want to thank Peter Ogburn for producing this podcast. We'll talk again next week.